Welcome to the Cosmic Chronicles podcast, where imagination meets reality and science fiction comes to life. I am your host, Quinn, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, James. How's it going, James?
It's good to be back.
Absolutely. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, or really wherever you listen to podcasts. If you click the link in the description, it will directly link you to our pages on social media, including YouTube, Instagram, and Discord. Our topic for today is the Three Body Problem book series. Why is it so popular? Why does it freak people out the way it does? Because this book really freaks people out. Some people cite this book as one of the scariest books they've ever read. Well, the book series is one of the scariest book series they've ever read. The Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy is a set of science fiction books by author Cixin Liu. The first book in the series was released in Chinese in the year 2008 and then released in English 6 years later. The second book in the series, The Dark Forest, was released in 2008 and then published in 2015. And the final book in the series, Death's End, was released in 2010 originally and finally published in English in 2016. Now, we both first read these books a few years ago, and I like them so much that I'd made an entire video series basically exploring every aspect of the books, and you can find all of those videos on my YouTube channel, Quinn's Ideas. Liu Cixin's trilogy is one of the most popular science fiction series in America written by a Chinese author, and I think the reason for that is pretty clear. The series evokes many different fears that we all have regardless of country. It resonates with humans because it is a story about humanity.
I first heard of the three-body problem on one of my regular trips to the bookstore. They had it on a fancy display, and it looked super interesting to me. So I picked it up, and I'm so glad I did. When did you first hear about this series, and what made you pick up a book with the strange title, The Three-Body Problem?
Well, for two very simple reasons. One reason is the same reason that I read like most of the newer books that I read today, and that's because of audience recommendations. This was a book that was recommended from my audience over and over and over again, and I finally picked it up and read it. And then the other reason, funnily enough, was because of the title itself. Like, I hadn't heard of the Isaac Newton thing before this, and so when I saw the title, Three Body Problem, it really grabbed my attention because I immediately thought, well, what is the three body problem? I want to know what the three body problem is. And also it had a really cool quote from Obama on it that said wildly imaginative. So I was like, oh, Obama thinks it's wildly imaginative, so maybe I should read it. So yeah, it was like the title and just it being recommended by my audiences. So that's how I encountered it initially. And by golly gee, I'm so glad that I read this series. It's one of the absolute best, I think, of modern science fiction.
So for anybody that doesn't know, just give us a brief summary of what the three-body problem is about.
Okay, so just a minor spoiler warning, minor spoilers. We will be talking about some of the overarching things that happen in the series. We won't be going into any of the big plot developments. We won't be giving any major spoilers, but we will be talking about some things that happen in the series. So if you don't want to know anything about the series at all, you don't want to be spoiled of anything at all, then probably click away. But if you want to get a general idea of what the series is about, and you don't mind some minor things being spoiled, then you can continue forward. So this is definitely a series that starts off very, very small, very contained. You're kind of following one guy, and as the books go on, it expands to the solar system, it expands to the galaxy, it expands to the universe, and then it's multiple dimensions, multiple universes. So it really, really zooms out. And it's about our place in the cosmos, our place among the grandeur of the cosmos, and the horror and the mystery of the cosmos we inhabit. So essentially, The main narrative in this story centers around the fact that humans have become aware of the fact that a powerful race of alien beings known as the Trisolarans are on their way to Earth, and they will arrive within 400 years to claim the Earth for themselves and likely annihilate all human life. So throughout the course of the books, humankind is dealing with the repercussions of that knowledge being out there and reacting to the information that there is a hostile predator coming to consume us. Also, a big part of the story is the fact that the aliens have limited human technological progression through various sci-fi means revolving around quantum mechanics. So things like physics have been totally rendered useless. And there are various other sciences like nanotechnology that the aliens do not want to advance. And the reason that that is because by the time 400 years passes, humanity could have had a huge technological boom. If you think about the Industrial Revolution and how much changed from the year 1800 to the year 2000, this is a very short amount of time for technological progression, and technological progression happens exponentially. So within 400 years, it is very possible that humankind could have matched or surpassed Trisolaran technological levels. So that was the reason that the Trisolarans had to limit human technological progression. So that's also a major idea in this book. So humankind has to deal with the fact that not only are aliens coming, but they have to find ways to work around the fact that our technology has been greatly crippled, and to work around the fact that the aliens are watching everything we do in real time.
I really like how this book starts out as one idea and it just takes you down this rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
And it keeps expanding and expanding, and it just doesn't stop.
As the characters are like kind of uncovering and unveiling these like cosmic mysteries, you're on this journey with them. Like, especially in that first book, you know very, very little. So it's like as it develops, it's just a very, very riveting, flow of a story. It really, really keeps you invested and interested.
Right. And as soon as you think you know where the story is going, turns out you have no idea where it's going.
There are significant twists and turns. That's why we're trying to be mostly vague about the narrative plot points while still giving you like the overarching ideas and themes.
Now, this book is nothing like anything I've ever read before, but I have seen this book compared to Lovecraft from time to time. Though I don't think Lovecraft's work and Cixin Liu's work bear very much resemblance. But what is it about the series that makes people think of Lovecraft?
Well, I think it's the existentialism, the horror of the cosmos, the fear of the unknown, right? The fear of powerful, malevolent forces from other dimensions. That's literally the idea of Lovecraft, that there are these powerful forces from like other realms of existence that can reach out and malevolently influence, our reality. So humans learn at some point in this book that the Trisolarans are one thing, but there are greater terrors out there in the darkness. There are more powerful civilizations that are much more malicious, and we really don't understand them, and we really can't really comprehend it. So I totally understand why the comparison between Lovecraft is made, because it evokes that same sense of cosmic mystery and cosmic fear, and also the sense of just, terror and dread that it brings, because what can we do to face it and what can we do to fight it? We really are powerless in the face of something like Cthulhu, and in the three-body problem universe, we really are powerless in the face of some of these omega powerful alien civilizations. I really kind of see the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy as kind of definitely an evolution of the ideas of cosmic horror that Lovecraft presented. The ideas in Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, although it's like the same core, it's much more complex. It's much more in-depth than anything that Lovecraft dreamed up. Lovecraft definitely kept it on the more like mysterious, the ambiguous side, where Cixin Liu gives you a lot more of the answers, and it's terrifying because it just seems super reasonable. So they are similar in the feelings that they evoke, but there definitely are significant distinctions, as you pointed out. They feel very different, even though the core emotion is similar.
I really like how the other beings in this universe are portrayed, because the author doesn't really describe the aliens. He
Doesn't
doesn't
really
tell
tell
you.
you what they look
He
like.
doesn't tell you what they look like. He doesn't tell you like what they're really doing.
There's a sense of it. It definitely gives. It makes you form an image of them in your mind, and it's I think, a really good like narrative device because you create like a more like scary image for them in your mind. I think. It keeps the mystery, even though he's like describing them. He's describing them in a way. This is like deep in the series. He's like describing some of these hyper advanced civilizations in a way so that it's familiar, but the way it's described allows for the mystery to be maintained, and it's very effective. And actually, also another similarity, if you think about it, to, like the beings in Lovecraft and kind of like these really advanced civilizations in Cixin Liu's series, is that the beings in Lovecraft, they just do what they do, regardless of what humans you exist, but they don't really care that much. And I think that when you get later in the series, things like the Singer, the way their race is described, they're just kind of doing what they're doing, and humans we kind of happen to cross their paths. It's not like actively malicious. It's just like they're so beyond that, like, we don't really matter that much to them.
Now, we just talked about how cosmic existentialism is one of the main themes of the three body problem. But there is a lot going on in this series, and several intersecting themes and ideas. So, what are some of the other main themes presented in this series?
Okay, so a major theme presented in this series is human cooperation on like a global level. In order to face off against this alien threat, which is not just coming for any particular country, it's coming for the whole world, humankind really has to cooperate as a species and really work together. And also a major theme is human history and development in the long term. Like we said, this series expands from decades to centuries to thousands of years to millions of years. Like, it keeps going and going and going. So it's dealing with the long view of history, and I really like things that deal with the long view of history, like Foundation, like Dune. It's another thing in that vein, and it's about humans' place in that history of the cosmos. It's really about humans' legacy, the legacy of humanity, like what we leave behind, and I think that's the reason that it's called the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, because it's about what is our mark on the universe? What do we leave behind in the universe? It's also about the power of nature and how the powers of nature can be harnessed to uplift humanity out of darkness. There have been so many times in human history where we've harnessed nature's power. Like, we can harness the power of the ocean, we can harness the power of the wind, we can harness the power of the sky. And Cixin Liu is saying that we can keep going with this. Eventually, we can harness the power of the very universe itself, the powers of gravity itself, and use it to uplift ourselves out of darkness. Harness the power of light, and it's so. He's saying that it doesn't have to end; it can keep going. There's so much untapped power waiting in nature that can be tapped into. So like a major theme of this is human technological progression and how we can work around challenges, even challenges like a hyper advanced race of aliens limiting our technological progression. And another major theme is definitely psychology on both an individual and on a mass level. We're talking about the behavior of humanity as a superorganism. And if you remember, in the Dark Forest, in the very beginning, we're kind of compared to an ant, because ants are the individual in an ant colony does not matter. All that matters is the colony. And there are times when humanity itself will act in the same way. We will act as a superorganism, and no individual can really steer it. It's the organism acting itself. And this series explores that idea as well. And I think it's all very, very interesting. So definitely a lot of intersecting, very complex themes and ideas are presented in this series. And it's definitely brain food for like nerdy people that really like these sorts of like esoteric concepts and ideas.
So, as we've talked about, the characters in this book must grapple with the dread brought on from the impending doom of the Tri-Solaran fleet. Now, how do their reactions reflect human nature?
So you see various different reactions, obviously. And every reaction that's presented in the books, I think, reflects a different aspect of human nature,
Mm.
right? So one of the big ones that you see like early on, like we know about the aliens coming, but a lot of people reject that. They just don't believe it. So that rejection of truth is a very, very, very human reaction. And I think that's one of the most common human reactions to uncomfortable truths. They completely reject it. They close their mind to it. They do not want to hear it at all. They will not acknowledge it. And almost nothing will make them acknowledge the truth. And then another reaction that is prominent is just dread. People become almost frozen with fear, and they almost can't act. They can't do anything. And then there's also on the other side of that is just people that completely just like totally give up. They completely give up. Like Earth is doomed. Like the books talk about how like people just kind of give up on the environment at some point, and they're just like, whatever. The Trisolarans are coming. Just like let it all go to hell. So a lot of people just like totally give up on everything. So it's just like this total like pessimism. And then there is the darker side of it, where we have like the severe selfishness that kind of leads into maliciousness. So there's several points in the series where like certain people have a chance to like escape some catastrophe, and other people are like actively trying to prevent that from happening, because it's like people like have this idea of like, if I can't survive, then neither can you. So we've got people that are literally trying to kill other people as they're trying to escape some catastrophe, because I don't know, sometimes when humans are in crisis, when traumatic things are happening, the worst of people really is shown. And that is definitely something that is explored in this series. We do see good things about humanity in this series portrayed, but we also see the negative side of humanity show itself. And we see what happens when we're really pushed to the brink and forced to show who we really are. Humanity is not rational. Most of the time we react emotionally. Sometimes we can get it together and act logically, but most of the time we react emotionally. And in this series, he shows us how, like, a lot of times when we react emotionally, it bites us in the butt.
Well, the knowledge of impending doom hits humanity hard.
Yeah, for sure.
There's an event in the book called The Great Ravine. The desolation of the earth, the desolation of the human spirit. But something that is highlighted in The Dark Forest and Death's End is humanity's resilience. No matter what is thrown at us, we seem to snap back. So what do you think Cixin Liu is trying to say here?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Humanity's resilience, humanity's perseverance. We persevere. The series is often, I hear this all the time. People say that this book series is very depressing and nihilistic, and they can't read something so depressing and nihilistic. And I do think it is at times depressing. I don't think it's nihilistic ultimately once you read all three books. I think
finish the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Death's End is definitely the most optimistic book in the trilogy. And it definitely ends on I think, a highlight. It points out that humankind manages to endure throughout the universe. Yeah, it's a significant struggle for a very, very long time. And yes, we have to go through a lot. But ultimately, if we keep fighting and we keep evolving, we can persevere. We can make it. And okay, it reminds me of something that I learned as a kid, like a long time ago, like early humans. We got down to a population of like 1,300 humans.
Whoa.
So yeah, we were almost completely annihilated off the face of the planet. So we almost went extinct. And apparently this has happened a couple of times in human history. This has happened a few times where we've almost gone extinct. But each time we bounce back. And I think Cixin Liu is definitely trying to highlight that. Like, although like things might seem completely dire at sometimes, although it might seem like there is no hope, humankind seems to keep moving forward and keep persevering. And we went from, 1,300 people back then to now dominating the entire planet. So I feel like he's pointing out that we can make it no matter how hard it looks.
Well, in the book, the Trisolarans call humans bugs.
Bugs,
And that's
exactly.
kind of like what we are. It doesn't matter. You can kill as many ants as you want inside your house, but they're going to keep coming back.
That's a good point. Like they say that, the cockroach is the only thing that survives a nuclear war.
Right.
Like the bugs always snap back. You can squash them as much as you want, but we will snap back. And yeah, that's a very interesting point.
So humans are bugs, and we should take pride in that.
Absolutely. Be proud of being an insect.
So the second book in this series is called The Dark Forest. And the concept of the Dark Forest is one that gets talked about a lot in reference to this series. People are absolutely terrified of the idea, myself included. So can you explain, just in simple terms, what the Dark Forest hypothesis is?
All right. I'll try to make this as simple and as less convoluted as possible, because it is kind of a multifaceted thing that has layers to it. But very basically, we're going to start with the concept of cosmic sociology. So you know about regular sociology on a basic level. Now take that and expand it to the cosmos. So there are two tenets presented in the Dark Forest of cosmic sociology. So one of them is that the goal of civilization is to expand. The second tenet is that there is a limited amount of energy and resources in the universe. So when you take these two tenets and you extrapolate, what you get to is that civilizations in the universe must compete for resources. Just like, different species in a forest on Earth, in a dark forest. So the implication here is that if you make yourself visible in this dark forest, if other civilizations are aware of you within this dark forest, then you are exposing yourself to a malicious attack. And there's more of a reason for why this is. Another big reason that's introduced and explained in the book is called the chain of suspicion. And without explaining everything about it, essentially the chain of suspicion says that two different civilizations on two different worlds from totally different evolutionary tracks can never be 100% sure that the other civilization that they are coming into contact with or witnessing is malicious or not malicious. So the only logical solution is to attack on sight. That is the concept of the Dark Forest. The universe is actively hostile. Any civilization that reveals itself will be ultimately wiped out by a more powerful civilization shielded in the Dark Forest that's more wise to hide. So in nature, that's the purpose of things like camouflage. If you are unseen, then you can get away. You won't be hunted by the bigger predators that want your energy, that want your resources. If you can manage to stay hidden, and a lot of animals do this in different ways, and the series talks about there's different ways to do this cosmically. Some animals like dig holes and hide in the ground. Some animals hide very far up in trees. Some animals blend in. So there's various ways to hide, but being exposed is dangerous. So this evokes an immediate sense of fear, obviously, because we've been sending out radio signals and all sorts of signals into outer space for years and years and years now, decades and decades and decades now, exposing ourselves to the Dark Forest. Maybe something would notice. We have no idea who's listening out there in the dark. So in the simplest terms, that is the Dark Forest. You can check out my video, What Makes the Forest Dark, if you want a more complex explanation of what the Dark Forest hypothesis is.
I have often thought of Remembrance of Earth's Past as Cixin Liu's answer to the Fermi paradox, where the Fermi paradox essentially asks, why, given the high probability of advanced extraterrestrial life, do we find ourselves in a universe where conclusive evidence of such life remains elusive? The math is in favor of intelligent life being fairly common, but the evidence suggests otherwise. And as you said, Cixin Liu presents the Dark Forest theory as a central idea in the story, proposing that advanced civilizations in the universe tend to remain silent and concealed to protect themselves from potential threats posed by other advanced civilizations. Now, do you think the Dark Forest theory is the reason why we haven't made any contact with any other forms of intelligent life?
Well, before we get to that, I want to point out that there is a book that came out a couple of decades ago called The Killing Star by Charles Pellegrino and George Zabrowski that has a very similar idea. That's basically the dark forest. So Cixin Liu wasn't the first person to think of this idea. It's been an idea that's been out there for a while, but Cixin Liu definitely like expands upon it a lot. Now, as to whether or not I think this is actually true, the scary thing about the dark forest hypothesis is that when you really understand it, it seems so incredibly reasonable. It seems like that's totally what's happening. It seems like we're totally beyond the shadow of a doubt, but it's only reasonable if everything that we think we know about the universe is actually true. There could be things that we don't even understand about the universe that make it so like the dark forest is just like totally doesn't make any sense at all, right? And there's also other possibilities like, we could be in a simulation right now where like only like a part of our galaxy or maybe just our galaxy is being simulated, and like maybe there are rules in the simulation that prevent civilizations from interacting, something like that. And then there's the possibility of the great filter as well. Have you heard of the idea of the great filter?
Oh, yeah.
So basically, for people that haven't heard of the great filter, it's just basically the idea that there is some sort of barrier that prevents civilizations from getting to the galactic stage. And that could just be the hostile nature of the cosmic environment itself, the fact that it's really, really hard to cross space. It could be just due to the fact that it takes a really, really long time to cross space and something goes wrong before that point in time. It could be because maybe civilizations of intelligent beings just trend towards self-destruction. Maybe we all nuke ourselves before then. It could be because most civilizations just don't see the need to travel that far. Maybe like they don't see the need to expend the energy, and maybe they're more fine just inhabiting their own little solar system, and there's really no point in going any further. So there's all sorts of reasons there could be a great filter, a barrier that prevents civilizations from getting to the stage where they need or want to interact with other civilizations. And then also, I could be a brain in a vat. You know what I mean? I could not. All of this could just be in my mind right now. So there's so many reasons that we might not be seeing aliens right now. But I totally get why the dark forest seems so reasonable, and it seems like if you extrapolate from everything that we see on Earth, then maybe the universe is like that as well. But like I said, there's all sorts of variables that we might not be considering, and the universe is so vast. And one of the things that I always think about is that we can only see a little bit of it at any point in time. We're really, really looking through a tiny, 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 tiny window. And then we're also only seeing the universe in certain ways. It's like my favorite quote in Dune ever. What senses do we lack that we cannot see and hear a hidden world all around us? Who knows what's out there? And who knows like why any of it even exists or how any of it even exists? We don't even know what this is. This cosmic soup that we're all floating around in, that it just exists for no reason. We don't know why it's here. It could be some great machine that we don't understand. So I can't say for sure that I believe in the dark forest hypothesis, even though I totally, totally get it. And maybe that's just me being afraid of it, that I'm trying to push it away and say, no, that definitely can't be it, because I obviously I want that Star Trek future.
You want to make contact.
Exactly. I want to hang out with the Vulcans. I don't want them to be mean. I want to share technologies, and I'm a nerd. I want that. So
listen, I just learned about this. In 1952, there was a group of 3 stars that vanished.
Whoa.
And astronomers still can't find them.
That's insane.
So there was an observatory that was undertaking a photographic survey of the night sky. And part of the project was to take multiple images of the same region of sky to help identify things such as asteroids.
Mm-hmm.
And they came across a cluster of 3 bright stars. Then an hour later, they took the same image, except for those 3 stars were gone.
Whoa. So This is like some advanced civilization of aliens like failing at some like technological thing and it like all goes wrong or something. Or maybe they succeeded. Maybe they teleported the stars.
Or maybe something was wrong with the camera. They were taking the picture. But
well, that's less exciting then.
true. But this could be evidence that we are living in a dark forest.
Well, yeah, maybe it was a civilization that like made itself known and somebody noticed and like took them out perhaps.
Or they're trying to hide.
Or they're trying to hide, like they hid themselves. That's another thing that comes up later in the series. The idea that we can shield we can wall ourselves off from the rest of the universe and become like invisible so no one could notice us. And that goes back to what we were just talking about too with the great filter. Like maybe like one of them is just like, they're all just like kind of hiding. So that kind of, it could be the great filter plus the dark forest hypothesis kind of, maybe they're hiding because of the dark forest. I don't know.
So something like this happens in a book I recently read called Pandora's Star by Peter F. Hamilton.
Great author, by the way, guys. Also did The Dreaming Void.
In it, they're viewing two different stars that they call the Dyson pair, and they vanish. And the whole book is trying to explain what happened to these stars. It's a great book, and I highly recommend it. And it reminded me a little bit of the Three Body Problem trilogy. So if you're a fan of Three Body Problem, definitely check out Pandora's Star by Peter F. Hamilton.
Anything by Peter F. Hamilton is going to be a nice sci-fi ride.
So earlier this year, Tencent released their 30-part adaptation of the first book in the series, The Three Body Problem. Netflix's version of The Three Body Problem will be dropping in January of next year. Now, I know you've already reviewed the Tencent show on your channel, but what are some of your hopes and fears for the American adaptation?
Well, my main hope is that it's respectful to the source material, that it remains true to the concepts and themes and ideas, because I can already tell that it's going to be different. I can tell by the cast that it's going to be different. I can just tell that it's going to be very different in a lot of ways. But I would hope that it remains true to the concepts that Cixin Liu presents, because I really do think they're very unique and very interesting. And I don't think the concepts themselves and the ideas really need to be altered that much. Another major thing is that please don't make it boring. Like, please don't make it boring. It needs to be entertaining and riveting and gripping. So that's a balance that has to be, toyed with. You got to get the balance correctly on that between like being compelling science fiction and being complex like the novels, but also making it interesting and engaging. And next, and I think this is more important than I think a lot of people want to acknowledge for modern productions, especially something science fiction, is that it needs good CGI. Absolutely, the CGI needs to be really good. And I'm hoping that it will be, because I know that the showrunners are David Benioff and Dan Weiss. And one thing that they were good at in Game of Thrones, if nothing else, was making things visually appealing and making things visually interesting and making things very like good stylistically. And that's also a balance that's going to have to be played with too, because they need to keep it sciencey and not be super action focused. Because there's a lot of times in the Game of Thrones show where like I, as a huge fan of the A Song of Ice and Fire books, were like, where's my favorite conversation between these two characters that I love? And it would be like, they'd have like this prolonged action scene that like basically did nothing for me. And that would always really bum me out, because the things that entertain me are, the cool concepts and the cool esoteric stuff, and not so much just like the action shots that are just done to keep like, the popcorn movie fluff style stuff, less of that, more cerebral science fiction. And definitely good actors. From what I've seen, it's got a pretty solid cast as far as acting goes. And finally, I guess like my greatest fear, if I really enjoy the show, is that Netflix would cancel it like they do with like every show that I actually like for some reason. So those are my hopes and fears in generally, because I remember 1899 Really liked that show.
Great show.
Yeah, great show.
And they canceled it.
They canceled it after
For
one
what?
season, and it was totally not finished, and it left on such a great cliffhanger. It was from the creators of Dark, and they just canceled it. So that's my main thing when I hear that Netflix is doing Three Body. Like, are you gonna cancel it? So we'll see. We'll definitely see. Unless it sucks. If it sucks, then get it out of here.
One of my hopes is that they adapt the entire first book and they don't stop somewhere in the middle so that they can keep the same cast. Because one of my fears is that season 2, they're going to want to keep the same characters when really we need to jump into the far future and we have to say goodbye to those characters and have a whole new cast.
Yeah, because we could end up with another Apple TV Foundation.
Oh, yikes.
Where they're trying to really, really draw it out. And anybody that's familiar with the Foundation books, we know that Foundation is about humanity over a long period of time, hundreds and hundreds of years. It's like a 1,000-year journey in the Foundation books. And one of the things that was very disappointing about the Apple TV show is that it's very clear that they want to keep the same actors around for many, many seasons, it seems like. Even though I haven't watched season 2, so I don't really know how it plays out. But the first season was pretty clear that they wanted to keep the same people around. And that's definitely a fear that I also have for Three Body Problem as well, because the Three Body Problem, the first book, like, almost none of those characters come back for the second book. So it's really not about these people, and you really can't tell the story if you try to make it about these people. Now, one thing I could see them doing is just taking these characters and having them be the ones, because minor spoiler, not really a spoiler, cryonic technology is used in this book. So they might have some of these characters in the first season be the ones that are being cryonically frozen so they can keep bringing them back for the later seasons as they advance humanity's storyline. But so, like I said, there's going to be changes, and I already know there's going to be changes. I've already accepted that. But God, please don't make Three Body Problem, the first book, into 3 seasons. Please don't do that, because that would not, I think that's already too stretched out. I thought the Cixin show, well, I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed watching the Cixin show. I definitely do think it was very stretched. 30 episodes I thought was a lot.
It was a lot.
For Three Body, for just that one book, which I think could have been done in 15 episodes or maybe 20, and then 15, I think would have been a good number. I don't think it needed 30. I think it had a lot of fat that could have been trimmed. And I know that if they really try to stretch it out of Netflix, it's going to be more fat. And with American shows, they always want to add a bunch of side characters that no one cares about, and a bunch of like love interests and all this extra stuff to fill it in. And it just really, can we keep it to the crazy cosmic existential stuff that really made the books popular? Because that's one thing that I think is a failing of a lot of adaptations, is that they don't recognize what made the thing that they're adapting popular, and they do their own thing, and then it totally falls flat. One of the examples that I have, and even though it's not really science fiction, one of my favorite graphic novels was by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And that graphic novel is one of the creepiest, coolest, dark, twisted tales that I've read. It's a great, spooky Halloween tale. But the Netflix adaptation totally, I think, missed the point with like how creepy the graphic novel is supposed to be and like how dark and twisted it actually is. And they like add a bunch of like fluff and like weird stuff that just totally like completely loses me. So remain true to what made it successful and interesting in the first place, and don't compromise on those elements so that you can catch a wider audience, because I feel like the product ultimately suffers because of that.
These books are very popular right now, but stories about alien invasions, they're not new. Like the War of the Worlds came out in the 1800s. So what is it about this particular alien invasion story that you think grabs people?
That's a good point. So by the way, War of the Worlds, it's still a riveting read even now. It's like a great, great story. But I think what's really different about Three Body Problem, what makes it distinct from most alien invasion stories, and like you said, alien invasion stories are not new and they're pretty well known. But what makes this one different is that usually in an alien invasion story, it's like we contact the aliens, they're here, they're invading us. And Three Body Problem, that is not the case. They're not invading until 400 years in the future. So really, this series is not about the alien invasion. It's more about humanity's reaction to the knowledge that the invasion is coming. So it's like, how does humanity deal with the fact that the invasion is forthcoming? So it's kind of highlighting how humans, we are not really good at like dealing with problems that are like way off in the future. Like if it's not directly in front of us, then we kind of like can like push it out of our mind.
We like to procrastinate.
We like to procrastinate.
But we shouldn't procrastinate with an alien invasion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one of the things that makes it distinct. And also, it starts off about humanity's reaction to the alien invasion, and then it moves on to humans understanding that an alien invasion from a more powerful alien race is not the worst thing that could actually happen to you in this malicious cosmos. So the Three Body Problem series goes beyond a simple alien invasion story. Like it's much more complex than the aliens are here and they want our resources. It's like the aliens are here. Now deal with that fact. Now also deal with the fact that the universe is far more hostile than you ever could have previously conceived of.
And you still have to deal with global warming all at the same time.
Still got to deal with all of it. You still got to deal with all the societal problems that already exist now with the threat of knowing that the universe that you live in is trying to kill you. It's not just trying to kill you because the environment is hostile. There are intelligent and powerful forces out there that want you to not be alive. So yeah, I think it has an element that is not present in most sci-fi invasion stories. And I think another major distinction between this one and most alien invasion stories is that it points out, I think reasonably, something that most alien stories don't acknowledge, is that if the aliens want to kill you and they're really so powerful and advanced, they don't need to come to your world to do it. Why do they need to get in a ship to come to your world to kill you when they can just send a quantum supercomputer that can screw you up, or they can just send like a dual vector foil, which I'm not going to tell you what that is because you got to read the book. It's a pretty big spoiler, but they can just send something with their advanced technology that can solve that for them. So most alien invasion stories, you've got the aliens that are here on ships, and it's like, would they really send physical alien bodies to attack humans, or would they at the very least send drones? You know what I mean? So I think that's an interesting thing that this series acknowledges that is not acknowledged a lot of times in invasion stories as well.
And all the aliens in these books are very truly alien. They don't look like us. They don't act like us. They don't have the same needs and desires as us.
Yeah, when he describes at the end of the first book, like the way the Trisolarans behave and think, it's very bizarre. Like it's written in terms where we can kind of relate it to how we are, but like, yeah, they're very, very bizarre. It's very, very alien. It's well done.
So earlier this week, we posted in the Discord and on our Instagram, asking our audience the question, how do you deal with the existential dread that sometimes comes with reading or watching sci-fi?
Jason from Discord says, I usually sit with it for a few days, going over what I read again and again, trying to make any sense of what occurred. He ponders on it. Okay, that's a good solution.
Iwazaru from Discord says, I am too bothered by the real-life atrocities of the current age to be all that impacted by the ones in science fiction.
That's good. You got a mind made out of stone, my friend. That's good to hear. Commodore Sean from Discord says, I watch and read more optimistic science fiction. It's not all doom and gloom as much as that seems to be the current trend. I'm a big fan of post-apocalyptic settings as well. All the fun and world building of wiping out the world, but with the optimism of seeing humanity rebuild after the end. See, that is a good solution. And I actually do think that Depths in the final book in the series kind of has a little bit of that vibe as well, that we're rebuilding things. We're kind of making it. It's hard, but we're making it. Yeah.
And I like optimistic science fiction in general. We're both fans of Star Trek. That's pretty optimistic.
Star Trek is like the most optimistic of the most optimistic, for sure.
So Joseph on Instagram says, I reflect on my beliefs that clash with existential dread. I really like this answer.
Very mature approach.
Yeah.
That's a very mature approach. Absolutely. I love it. Arta, the artist on Instagram, says, it actually takes my mind off its nihilistic view of life. Oh, well, that works for you. That's
Whatever
good
helps.
for you, yeah.
Francisco from Instagram says, by using that feeling to imagine new ideas for a horror story.
Oh, yeah, you take that energy and you channel it into being creative. See, I'm down with that. I like that. I like that a lot.
I like how existential dread can make a great muse.
Mm-hmm. And Steven from Instagram says, surrender to the flow, enjoy the ride. I'm honored to be here. Basically my approach. That's how I am. Just deal with it. Just like let it wash over you. Let it wash over you and move through you.
Breathe in,
I must
breathe
not
out.
fear. Fear is the mind killer. Yeah.
So last but not least, Voiceover Joe from Instagram. He says, science fiction doesn't just remind us of the mortality of our individual lives, but of our sense of place in the universe. Each discovery that science has made diminishes our preeminence in the natural scheme of things. We are living on a speck of dust, floating in an unfathomably vast emptiness. We should recognize it, accept it for what it is, and get on with our lives. Live life with gratitude, love, and with humor. Be humble, and just don't be a jerk. That's not asking a lot of us. Much love. Well, thanks, Joe, and that is a nice, positive message to end this episode on.
Thanks so much for watching this week's episode of the Cosmic Chronicles podcast. We will be posting episodes, as always, every other Friday. Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, YouTube. Get us wherever you listen to podcasts, and also check us out on our social media, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter. Thanks for listening, guys.